Hello, friends, and welcome. Just wanted to share with you some things that God has been showing me with regard to the onset of the sixth seal that we anticipate will happen any day now. Now, we did see earlier in the week where the sign for the opening of that seal did transpire. The seven seals are represented in the heavens by the seven planets. So we saw the eclipse, or I should say conjunction rather, of Neptune and the sun. And we affiliate Neptune with the water god, Neptune with water judgments, perhaps, just as God did with the judgments with the plagues of Egypt. He will also show his strength by judging the modern gods that we have today, and the planets that surround us are all named after the Greco-Roman gods that we affiliate many of the world's vices, such as war, lust, greed, all of those things. So normally we will randomly open the Bible and I'll just read anything that's underlined. Nothing's underlined, just whatever I feel the Lord drawing my attention to. But I thought I would share with you what God showed me just in my quiet time this morning. And yes, my Bible is still falling apart. And I take that as a badge of honor because I have been through it almost 12 times, front and back, by God's grace. But I do have it pulled up here in front of you as well. But we're going to just go ahead and read the underlined portions, and then we're going to look at the full passages. Again, starting with chapter 10 from the book of Joshua. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community, and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. So this is the story of the Gibeonites who had made a treaty with Joshua before Joshua realized that they were inhabitants of the land. And so rather than killing them, because he had signed that treaty, he made them woodcutters and I believe water bearers. Woodcutters and water carriers, which is interesting because we look at Aquarius as being the water bearer, and then he is one of the four living creatures in the constellations, the one with the face of a man. Interesting. All right, chapter 10, I have verse 3 underlined. So Adonai Zedek, which I'm curious about the meaning of that name, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoam, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhiah, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. So we've got a time of war going on with this judgment. That's extremely interesting. The next verse I have underlined is verse number 9. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them, his enemies, by surprise. Verse 11. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky, and more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On that day, the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel. Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jasher, and we're going to look at that in a moment. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. So in this scene, this is a good thing for Israel and a bad scenario for their enemies. Now, actually, rather than reading this again in Joshua, let's take a look over at the book of Jasher. This is actually going to be chapter 89 of the book of Jasher. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. One moment. Then spoke Joshua this song on the day that the Lord had given the Amorites into the hand of Joshua and the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of all Israel, Thou hast done mighty things, O Lord. Thou hast performed great deeds. Who is like unto thee? My lips shall sing thy name, my goodness and my fortress, my high tower. I will sing a new song unto thee with thanksgiving, and I will sing to thee, Thou art the strength of my salvation. All the kings of the earth shall praise thee. The princes of the world shall sing to thee. The children of Israel shall rejoice in thy salvation. They shall sing and praise thy power. To thee, O Lord, did we confide. We said, Thou art our God, for thou wast our shelter and strong tower against our enemies. To thee we cried and were not ashamed. In thee we trusted and were delivered. When we cried unto thee, thou didst hear our voice. Thou didst deliver our souls from the sword. Thou didst show unto us thy grace. Thou didst give unto us thy salvation. Thou didst rejoice our hearts with thy strength. Thou didst go forth for our salvation. With thine arm thou didst redeem thy people. Thou didst answer us from the heavens of thy holiness. Thou didst save us from 10,000s of people. The sun and moon stood still in heaven, and thou didst stand in thy wrath against our oppressors, and didst command thy judgments over them. All the princes of the earth stood up. The kings of the nations had gathered themselves together. They were not moved at thy presence. They desired thy battles. Thou didst rise against them in thine anger, and didst bring down thy wrath upon them. Thou didst destroy them in thine anger, and cut them off in thine heart. Nations have been consumed with thy fury. Kingdoms have declined because of thy wrath. Thou didst wound kings in the day of thine anger. Thou didst pour out thy fury upon them. Thy wrathful anger took hold of them. Thou didst turn their iniquity upon them, and didst cut them off in their wickedness. They did spread a trap. They fell therein. In the net they hid. Their foot was caught. All right, listen. So what we're seeing is in the midst of the battle, the enemies of Israel, they had set these traps. And I know that we can relate to this today. All these things that have happened that are described in Ezekiel, in Jeremiah, in Joshua, in the book of Luke, they have happened throughout history. This is just a judgment. And I want people to understand that, yes, while Revelation does say that there is finality here, this is something that has happened over and over again. And God still loves people. He doesn't just hate them. The tribulation is not just 7 years of God hating on people. He loves them. His goal in this time is for people to repent. And we're going to see that in the book of Luke. Just hang tight. Verse 14, Thine hand was ready for all thine enemies who said, through their sword they possessed the land. Through their arm they dwelt in the city. Thou didst fill their faces with shame. Thou didst bring their horns down to the ground. Thou didst terrify them in thy wrath, and didst destroy them in thine anger. Here we go. Verse 15. The earth trembled and shook at the sound of thy storm over them. Thou didst not withhold their souls from death, and didst bring them down their lives to the grave. Thou didst pursue them in thy storm. Thou didst consume them in thy whirlwind, and didst turn their rain to hail. They fell in deep pits, so that they could not rise. Their carcasses were like rubbish cast out in the middle of the streets. They were consumed and destroyed in thine anger. Thou didst save thy people with thy might. Therefore our hearts rejoice in thee, for our souls exult in thy salvation. Our tongues shall relate thy might. We will sing and praise thy wondrous works. For thou didst save us from our enemies. Thou didst deliver us from those who rose up against us. Thou didst destroy them before us, and depress them beneath our feet. Thus shall all thine enemies perish, O Lord, and the wicked shall be like chaff driven by the wind, and thy beloved shall be like trees planted by the waters. So Joshua and all Israel with him returned to the camp in Gilgal, after having smitten all the kings, so that not a remnant was left of them. All right, friends. So this is Jasher 89. If you want to read about what happens to these kings, the 5 kings that fled, it wasn't good. They went and hid themselves in a cave, and Joshua found them. So this is very reminiscent of what we see with the 6th seal in chapter 6 of the book of Revelation. Let's just refresh our memories in terms of what that says. All right, so verse 12, Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? And we see this day described also in, I believe, Micah and Amos and the book of Joel. Again, it happens over and over again. And with the account with Joshua, the sun actually stood still. So even though there are similarities, there are also differences. It's said that this incoming planetary system, this dwarf star and its accompanying planets, it has different planets, and it could be a judgment by a different one. And that's what it sounds like if you listened to the Paul Begley web conference with Mike from around the world. It got pretty nuts. It got pretty crazy. But I believe what he said. It's so interesting and I'll get to this at the end of this lesson. We're going to look at the book of Luke, but keep in mind that the different planets, because I've got a reference from a cartoon in the 80s that had something that was just very predictive programming. We're going to get to the book of Luke first, because this is going to be very somber. And this is the crucifixion. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. Luke 23, starting with verse 1. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, Thou sayest it. Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracles done by him. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I have examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accused him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and though nothing worthy of death is done unto him, I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. Pilate therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake unto him again. But they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Syrian, coming out from the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. And there followed him a great company of people, and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and your children. For behold, the days are coming, in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And there were also two other malefactors led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast his lots. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself. And a superscription also was written over him in letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other, answering, rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour, and the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. And when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. And all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. And all his acquaintance and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and a just. The same had not consented to the counsel and deed of them. He was of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. This man went unto Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. And he took it down and wrapped it in linen and laid it in the sepulchre that was hewn in the stone, wherein never a man before was laid. And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. The women also, which came with him from Galilee, followed after, and beheld the sepulchre, and how his body was laid. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments, and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandments. And that was Luke 23. If you would like to read of the resurrection. I believe that there was an earthquake with a resurrection as well, wasn't there? One moment. All right, so for the earthquake at the resurrection, we're going to go to Matthew 28. Verse 1, In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him the keepers did shake, and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly, and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall you see him, though I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then said Jesus unto them, Be not afraid. Go tell my brethren that they go into Galilee, and there shall they see me. All right, and again, this is chapter 28 of the book of Matthew. And if you would like to read a little bit more, I think that it's also interesting to know at the crucifixion, we see in verse 51 of Matthew 27, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared to many. All right, now there's a lot going on there. But it's interesting to note that there was an earthquake, and then, they had the hail, and all of these things happened. Did it say hail with this one? There was hail with Joshua. But there may not have been actual hail with the crucifixion. But we did have a couple of major earthquakes, at least a couple, and the veil in the temple was torn in two. Let me collect my thoughts just a second. Okay, so about a month ago, an object was recorded on an FAA camera. Let's see, Wolf Creek Pass. I don't know if that's Alaska. It could be. Let me look real quick. Excuse me, it's Colorado. I thought that sounded a little funny. All right, so this object here was recorded, and there is a woman. I'm going to move this over so you guys can see. The name of her channel is The Final Days, and she just goes through all of the camera footage, what's left over after it's been scrubbed, and she says that at this point they're not scrubbing it anymore. At least in this case, she was able to find some really good material. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in full screen mode for you guys. All right, so let's just play this through and see what happens. So it appears that there is a rotating object with craters all over it. You can see the time stamp over here, and this was just earlier this month. And then she, kind of modifies things so we can see things a little more closely. But what I want to show you is actually from a cartoon back in the 80s. And the name of the cartoon was He-Man. And I know Masters of the Universe. And I know a lot of you will be familiar with that cartoon. And this woman, she's been around for a while, has done a lot of these videos. Again, it's The Final Days. I'll have it linked below in the description. So what I wanted to show you is going to be a cartoon clip next. Okay, so this is He-Man, and it's the He-Man official channel. And if you don't know who this character is, I should probably get the logo on up here. This is basically a person, a prince who found a sword, or it was given to him, and he has certain powers, superhuman powers, when he ignites it. And it's a secret in terms of, who knows that he can do this. So there's a number of interesting characters. There's Castle Grayskull, and this is, him turning into He-Man. I do want to also note that there is a sorceress who is supposedly a good entity. And then there's a number of other ones. And then on the other side, there's Skeletor, the bad guy. Oh, here's the sorcerer. All right, so this is the actual episode I was looking for. I had the wrong one up, but it's the Cosmic Comet, the first ever He-Man episode. And somehow, you'll see if you watch this episode, I can link it, that the indicator that it's time for the comet is that the stars are in the right position. And it's this Beast Man character that is with Evil Lynn. And yes, I do remember that from my childhood, Evil Lynn. And they're trying to attack Grayskull. Now, I had to think about this for a second because I was like, Grayskull, why does that sound like something recent? So I'm going to pause this. So about a month back, and we've looked at this before, we looked at the Time article about, I'll just read the title, NASA says skull-faced zombie comet will make Halloween flyby. This was back in 2015. And so this comet somehow has the shaping of a skull. So I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but it seems like there could be one. But the plot of this story from the cartoon He-Man is that this comet can somehow be harnessed, like the powers of this comet can be harnessed. So I just found that interesting, but I'm gonna pause this and show you the next episode that I saw. And the name of this episode is Trouble's Middle Name. With this one, it does seem to mimic or even mock the darkness that's going to come on this planet, the eclipse. And what I thought was particularly interesting with this story, I'll just give you a little bit of a synopsis. They are looking for old treasures, hieroglyphics to give them whatever information. Let me pause it and I'll cue it up. Or excuse me, that was actually the wrong one. So the one that we're going to look at is called Eternal Darkness. And something is happening in the Earth's crust that is causing all of these. Look at that. Look at that planet right there. But in the story, something is causing a disturbance in the Earth's crust so that all these earthquakes are happening, and it somehow opens what one might refer to as the abyss, and it lets these creatures out. This is just a dream that Adam is having. It turns out that everybody's having dreams like this because this creature has been let loose. So there's a spiritual component here, a spiritual darkness that we've talked about in videos past. And then over here, we're taken to this ancient destroyed city, and they are going to find an artifact there that's somehow going to trigger a response from these ancient robots who in turn are going to somehow freeze these people into some sort of cryo, frozen state until they can decide what to do with them. Oh, this is so weird. So Man-at-Arms, yes, I did remember his name. He's using some sort of device to make food out of sand with a chemical compound. But if you look at it, I mean, it looks like a turd. I'm not sure. It looks like mockery to me. But that's the way that these people think. So they're gonna see this book here, and I'm not gonna belabor this too much. There we go. There's the book, and then these robots are gonna come out and take them captive. Now I'm gonna pause because I want you to see just a little bit more. And then somehow in the midst of all this, a storm begins to brew. Uh, He-Man, with his superpowers, winds up capturing the storm and it's no longer an issue. But when this thing actually does happen, it's not gonna be just put away like that. So this creature, when it is found, it's conspiring with the other wicked beings and they're trying to make the whole world dark. And they're like, well, we can't just do it on our own. We need the moon to make it dark. So there's an eclipse scene, and it turns out that they mess up really bad because that's just what evil does. And instead of just covering the sun forever, the moon starts heading toward the planet. Let me see if I can get that one pulled up. Oh, here we go. So it messes around with their gravitational force. It's just, a crazy thing. So again, this scene is likely depicting the fifth trumpet. We're not going to be here for that. The fourth and fifth trumpet, the fourth trumpet being, the darkness, and then the fifth trumpet and continuation of that darkness, plus the opening of the abyss. And we had a comment, I think we've talked about this before, playback speed, how sometimes people can increase playback speed, even if it's with my videos. That's okay. I get it. They can be a little long, but this is the way to do it, is just to click on this little gear here and then adjust your playback speed. So, I mean, this is how this story goes, is that, the planet is heading toward them and they have to somehow get it to stop. Now, the other thing I want to point out is this sorceress figure here. Okay, because she's portrayed as a good person. That's a shape shifter. That's a witch. They really do exist. In fact, I know somebody personally who believes that in his village in Mexico, they did have an old woman who could do that. The scary thing about this is, let's see if I can put on the closed captioning, is that the character will not turn back into her human form in front of people because she doesn't want them to know that she can do this. So they're like, please, you've got to change back. You've got to help us. But she will not do it. She will not do it. She will not do it. She will jeopardize the entire planet to keep her secret safe. So keep that in mind. Things that look good on the outside. I mean, this sorceress is a sorceress. She is a witch. And there are plenty of people out there who want to present themselves as people of light, but they're not. They're not going to help you. They're not going to help us when, times of crisis occur. So anyways, that's what I was able to pull up from this. If you want to watch something that's relatively, benign and safe, and find some predictive programming, this might be a place to start. This particular video is about 3 hours long. There's lots and lots of different episodes, but obviously don't spend all your time doing this. But it is interesting to watch, and I think over the course of maybe the next few weeks, I'll be watching some of these myself, but not more than what I'm spending in prayer and in time with God. Speaking of which, why don't we go ahead and turn to the word? We did have one request for April 21st, so let's end on that note. Have that open in our screen. One moment. All right, for April 21st, we do have the sun going between Aries and Cetus, the water beast. We also have C202103 Pan stars that appears like a lamb that goes near Aries, but then speaks like a dragon. It goes on over here to this constellation, Draco. Again, just kind of a scene of a showdown between good and evil. At first, it was with Pisces and Cetus, and now it's the Lamb and Cetus. So right over here, Uranus, that is our seventh planet in precession. It will herald the seventh seal, but with the seventh seal, there will be a half hour of silence. And if you watched our previous video, you know that that's going to be about 7 months. And that's because that's about the time span between this conjunction and the sounding of the trumpets that we determined would be later in December. So definitely, activity from the sixth seal. This may also be about the time that we see the Antichrist coming onto the scene, just because we took that half hour time span from Revelation 8, I believe it was, and then we compared it with Revelation 17, where the 10 rulers will rule with the Antichrist for an hour, determined that would be 14 months. Then we looked at the end of the second trumpet and counted back 14 months and came to April 28th. Let me bring that date up. And then there was a conjunction that we were looking at, and it escapes me right now. But there was something really significant. I'll have to dig that video up. Oh, here's 45P, reminiscent of the 45th president. And I looked up some of these characters, and they were scientists. I believe they had Ukrainian ties. This guy for sure, I'll have to look that up again, but just a lot of, I think they were censored. There was some censorship in what they were trying to share with people, but that's for another video. Let's go ahead and close with the Word of God. Lord, please show us marvelous things in your Word. We are taken to Psalms 91, verse 13. You will tread upon the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. Jumping over to 92, verse 12. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. May the Lord add a blessing to the hearing of his word. Thank you so much for hanging in here. I know this was probably a long video. God bless, and I look forward to seeing you soon.